Hi, I'm Bruce Fretz. I'm here to introduce writer-director Tamara Jenkins and the wonderful Kayli Carter. So, Tamara, it's such a heartbreakingly beautiful movie. What was the original genesis of it?
Well, the genesis was a personal experience with infertility. And then, but I wasn't thinking about making a movie at the time. I was thinking about having a baby. A friend of mine actually, when I was in the throes of the infertility drama of my own, this isn't like a true memoir. Mm-hmm. Although there's definitely a lot of stuff that I know about, but there's a lot of fiction. For instance, Kayli's character. I had my own experience with it. I never thought it would be material for a movie. I thought it was a horrible idea. A friend of mine suggested it to me when I was in it. Like, are you keeping notes? This stuff is really, you should write this down. And I was horrified. I was in it, so it was really horrifying. And then at some point I sort of looked around and discovered that it was like an epidemic among my peers, that a lot of people that I knew had delayed certain aspects of adulthood, and because of their kind of wonky lives, like freelance style life of a specific kind of New York person, which these guys are. And I started warming to the idea of exploring it as a movie.
And Kayli, how did you get involved? Was it a traditional audition process, or?
I don't know that it was necessarily traditional because I came in at the 12th hour. They had an actress who left due to scheduling conflicts, very close to when
3
filming.
weeks before we were shooting.
Very close to when filming was starting, and I had flown back from doing a play in London, and that experience had been really gratifying for me artistically. And I was reading a lot of things that were not artistically gratifying during pilot season. And I kind of thought, oh no, I've put myself in a bad place having done this job that kind of was the tops in London on the West End doing theater. What do I do next? And this script came into my inbox at a time where I was having my own existential crisis, similar to what Sadie is having. Mm-hmm. And it was such a relief because the woman in it was not just a character in these people's story, or as I see women a lot of the time, being a supportive character in someone else's story. She had her own method and her own madness and her own ideas, and that was really exciting and liberating to get to play out. So my goal was they were in a tight spot. I was going to go in and throw anything I had at the wall to make it stick. And it did, somehow, because she's brilliant. And our casting directors were lovely and had me in like 7 days that week. Every day they had me in doing another scene and were just guiding lights through it.
And what did you see in Kayli?
Well, so we really did lose somebody close to production. And when we lost that person, I thought that the plug was going to get pulled on the movie entirely. Mm-hmm. The movie had come from one studio and then went to Netflix in a whole rigmarole. But when we came to Netflix, there was like a package. There was like, these are the actors, this is the movie. And we were in production or in pre-production. So when that person dropped out for her, whatever her stuff was going on with her, I didn't mean whatever. When she had her scheduling stuff, I was like, we're gonna die now. We're gonna die. This is death. I remember my producer walking into we were in this rickety production office, and him walking in, and the doors were always sort of flopping. They were all flopped open. It was a production office, and he walked in, he shut the door, and I was very unnerved. And he said, with a very cheerful face, well, so-and-so, and they dropped out, and, and I just thought that he was going to say, but now the movie is over. And he said, Netflix, we have to find somebody. And we started looking, and, we fell in love with her, and she wasn't famous. And we got scared, like there were, that she was the best man for the job was her. And she was vulnerable and smart, and she matched it so well. It was weird. And also the fabric of the movie just felt so right with her in terms of the Paul and Kathryn, the sort of authenticity of that relationship that feels like real people. And then throwing her in the mix just felt so right. And I also love that she wasn't somebody that everyone knew, because there was no expectation of what her role would be, the scale of her role. Like, you just meet her, and then you don't meet her for 20 minutes later, and then you're like, oh wow, she's going to be significant. And I just always find that so great when I see films from other countries where I don't know what the significance is of these actors, and you're just sort of dragged in, and then it's not like, oh, it's Brad Pitt, so he's going to become important because he's Brad Pitt.
Right.
Of course he's going to be important. He's not just walking past the frame because he's there. I mean, so it's really nice. He's not just in town and walking by.
Just in town. I am just in town. If you
so
need
I
me,
like
I am in town.
There's nothing, determining
Yes,
what
yes.
the significance
Right.
will be of that role or
Right.
of that character.
Right.
So anyway, that's like a weird meta thing.
No.
But I just thought, yeah, she was so she was super fresh. And we were at like that's such a gross word. It's like fresh meat or something.
Supple. She
No,
was
no,
really
it's just a
supple and
kind
young.
of- there was a-
Reflector.
she just felt like a
fresh
student that
face,
dropped
yeah,
out of
yeah.
Bard.
Yeah.
When she did come back a lot, and I think there was like anxiety because usually when you
I could
have
feel
an
your
actor-
anxiety that close to the wire. I mean, I
we
knew.
were really close to the wire, and this is an actor that did not have like a huge body of work that I could like sort of bank on. I mean, not economically, but I mean, just see her breadth of work. So, and she came in and she was fantastic.
And
I
the
was-
worst thing is, you need a body of work to show people your body of work.
Yeah, it's very weird.
So I
It's
was
a
in a little bit
catch-22.
of a bad position of going, oh no, I have no body of work to show this person. And they expect me to really show up next to Kathryn Hahn and Paul Giamatti, who in this movie are doing some of their best work, which is saying something, especially about those American treasures. To hold up against them when they are uncompromising in how honest and how connected they are with other actors, which I have to say is kind of a rare thing, to be on set with actors who aren't thinking about the job they're doing, but are more worried about what you're doing and are trying to watch you. As like a young person coming into the game, having people look at me and watch what I was going to bring to it is...
That was another meta thing that was happening, because Kayli's relationship to them as an actress was very, she looked up to them. They were older actors that were, and it felt like the anamana poetic or whatever to the narrative that she was like kind of enamored with the in the film.
Yes.
The niece is enamored with her aunt and uncle,
Right.
and that they're so cool.
Yes.
And there was a little bit of that, not so simply, but admiration, and
Yeah.
that was sort of a nice dynamic that was built in.
Yeah. So let's talk about Paul and Kathryn. I gather that you knew Paul from he had been in Sideways, which your husband Jim Taylor co-wrote, and you had wanted to cast him in The Savages, and he did not appear in The
He
Savages.
did, and he said no, and I cried. I really cried.
settle
I
for
kind of
Philip Seymour
remember. I
Hoffman.
know.
I mean,
was
yeah,
that. Yeah. What a bust.
Yeah.
That's what Paul says. I mean, Paul said. He said to me when I reapproached him for this, which was like 10 years later, and wrote a note, a really nervous, like, you've spurned me once, and I'm scared to ask you again, but I'm going to put my ego aside because I think you'd be amazing in this and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, and then we met, and then he said to me, that was the first time in my life that someone had gone to me before Phil Hoffman, because my whole career, they go to Phil Hoffman, Phil passes, then they would go to him. And he said that never happened before, and I was like, interesting, okay. So anyway, he said he wanted to do the movie, and I was really excited.
And Paul and Kathryn didn't really know each other, but they had to, attain this real sense of intimacy very quickly. And I read that you cooked dinner for them, but then you made them do the dishes together.
I did. That was a good acting exercise for marriage.
You got free labor out of it,
exactly.
out of the whole deal.
I thought it was a perfect marriage exercise. Wash dishes. I'll go in the other room. So yeah, it was a very it was a small budget. There wasn't a big rehearsal built into the schedule. But there was a moment right before, maybe a month before we were making the movie or starting production. I can't remember, but it was an accident that Kathryn happened to be in the city of New York because she was doing publicity for Bad Moms. Paul was here, but he was about to leave to do a movie in Eastern Europe somewhere. And there was this one day, and I said, can we get together? Can we make this happen? And it would be the first time they'd ever met in the real world. And so I said, Paul, can we do it at your house? And he said yes. And I went over there and I cooked a New York Times recipe and a pasta, a bolognese kind of thing. And they met there for the first time, and it was nice. It was very exciting to see them in the room together for the first time. It's so incredible, that thing where you're like, when you really, because it's you're anticipating chemistry, but you don't know what's gonna happen. It's like you're like some old Yenta or something. Matchmaker.
I remember,
and you're like, please.
I remember though walking into the very first screen test, and it was the first time I met Paul and Kathryn before we had rehearsal at his house.
Oh, you mean when we?
It was before I had even met. It was the very first day that I met them, and I walked into where we were doing hair and makeup tests.
Was that when we were doing hair and makeup tests? And we were also doing little.
We were doing stuff.
Shooting the stuff with the girl.
And I walked in, and they were. Their dumb jokes were so fast and so fast and furious from the get-go, and their synergy was. And I was like, oh. No, they felt like they had the chemistry of a married couple for a long time.
Except they were laughing more.
They were laughing way more. They were laughing way more, but that was very scary for me.
We bludgeoned that out of them.
She did, which I think is helpful. Any sentimentality that any of us actors felt, because we are more of a touchy-feely group than I think you anticipated, and then any bit of sentimentality, which this really needed, she was beating out of us, just you cannot touch each other.
No, that isn't it.
No, Kathryn would put her hand on my knee, and you were like, that's too much. That's too much intimacy.
This is my theory. This is my theory about actors are way more fluent emotionally than human regular people. And so you have to pull it. It's
you do.
They're over-exercised.
We needed it
in creating quick intimacy because they have to do that because that's the nature of their job, and also a kind of it's like you're over fluent in emotional availability, and not all most human beings are repressed and suppressed. Just like the movie. Yeah.
And you want to soak in everything. I think because the nature of these relationships are so fleeting, it's also it's you want to savor every moment that you have, especially acting next to those people. I want to be as wrapped in them as I can possibly be, since we only have 30 days to shoot. I have 30 days with these people to make it feel like I've known them for years and years. And you do want to make that count because you know how important it is.
But I'm just interested in that idea of making an. I remember there was a few moments in
We're wrong. You're right.
No, it's not that wrong. It's sitting in uncomfortable. I remember having a thing. Sometimes you're shooting something as a director and something's not working and you don't know what it is. And it was in that hospital room scene that was making me crazy.
I was crying and they wanted to touch
and
me.
they were like, "Oh," and I
Yeah.
was like, "No," and we had to go back and reshoot it in a sort of a different way. But I couldn't express what it was, and then I realized it's when she was in the hospital, and they realize what she's done to herself. And when we shot it, when she started crying, they were like, "Oh, and I was like, this is terrible. This is," and I couldn't articulate what was I was like, well, I guess that's a human response to like somebody's crying and you hug them. And then I thought, no, you guys have to feel the shame of what, like, oh my God, look what we have wrought. Like that kind of their realization and sit in it and not deflect it and just go hug the person. So that was a realization to me about like restraining that and sitting in the uncomfortableness, because really what you're doing when they're hugging you is they're getting it off their back. Yeah. But if you have to sit with the discomfort of what you did and maybe stretch it a little longer, because that's what you do in films, you know, you like extend moments that would just be fleeting in life sometimes, and that you have to sit in your shit, which is essentially what they have to do in that scene. And then I realized, no, that's what that scene is about. But I didn't have it at first. Yeah.
And all the characters are so well drawn and wonderfully portrayed. I wanted to ask about Molly Shannon and John Carroll Lynch. What did you see in them to cast in those roles, and what was it like for you to play their daughter and
I was obsessed
stepdaughter?
with Molly. Yeah. My casting director is so amazing, and she was like, Kathryn Hahn. I mean, we sat down. The first thing that she said to me, "Wow, this is a perfect part for Kathryn Hahn." And I didn't really know Kathryn's body of work. I really didn't. And I was like, "Wait, is she the woman? Is she the rabbi? Is she the rabbi on the you know?" And I had to go home and I watch everything that she did. And then I called Jeannie McCarthy, the casting director, and said, "Oh, you're right. She really is amazing." And she, you know, she auditioned
I generally say, like, people don't know that Kathryn is like Yale trained, could do Shakespeare on the back of a horse if you needed her to. I mean, like, she's the kind of actress who could do really most anything, but she straddles what you write so beautifully, which is the magic.
And well, so anyway, the reason that I was bringing that up is because Jeannie McCarthy, everybody was like, anybody that she said was just so right. I mean, she called me before the tape of her came in, and she said, "Oh, I think, you know, this was after like hundreds of young, wonderful actors, but nobody was the one." And anyway, she's amazing. Molly was somebody that I had Paul in my mind because I had that relationship and that obsession with working with him. And then but I also saw Molly in that film. Other People.
Yes,
and thought she was amazing. Yes. And got really hooked on the idea of her playing the part, because when I wrote the part, I was worried that she was so brittle. And then there was something about Molly that I just thought offset that and had this kind of this warmth mixed with the whatever that character's things are, damage is. And I just became obsessed with Molly. And it was really hard to get her because she was doing something else, and her people were not interested in this pursuit. They were like, "Oh, it's a small part, whatever. We're not that." And I was like, "No, we have to make this happen." And I ended up going around. This is on tape. I'm in trouble.
You're gonna be in trouble.
I mean, they were nice people.
And this is for the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, so you have to remember.
No. I'm just saying, I think that they were legitimately protecting their actor, thinking this is not, you know, it's not the lead. Yeah. And I'm thinking, like, Molly's going to be amazing in this, and it's a great part, and I think that she's going to...
And Molly got it in a way that I think a lot of other people would not have gotten it.
This is just in the craziness of the business, because we kept trying to, and it was like, it was never getting to her. It was always like a no. Oh, she's doing divorce. She's doing this. She can't do it. And then I was like, divorce, but that's shooting in New York. And I was like, but we're in New York, and that's when we're shooting. And I just kept, and it just kept hitting up against these walls. And well, there'll be schedule conflicts. There'll be this and that. And then I hijacked it.
Good. I'm glad you did.
I got her email,
and
I wrote to her, and I had met her once, and she recalled meeting, and I said, I have something that I think you'd be amazing in, and it's not the lead. Just to preface it, but it's a really terrific part. And based on like the email, she says, "Oh my God, that sounds great. I'll do it." And I was like, "Well, I'll send it to you." And then I sent it to her, and like 2.5 hours later, you know, she wrote back and she said, "Oh, I love it. I want to do it." And so that was just amazing.
And how was it for you working with her? I mean, your relationship with the characters is so kind of fraught, but what was your relationship like?
The day of Thanksgiving that we filmed, that was the day that I met Molly Shannon.
Wow.
And I was like bowled over by her energy, and her passion was just like immediately, she's just so bright on set, and I was like, oh my gosh. And we shot that pretty much in sequence. I mean, almost exactly in sequence of what happens on that day. And that dinner table is such a colossal undertaking in terms of filming every single part of that table. So by the time we got to the laundry room scene at the end, we had maybe 15 minutes, and that's being generous at the end of the night to do that laundry room scene.
Right, because we had to do
so much.
Like the 30-day hell, because you think like on a normal schedule you'd be like, oh well,
do
the
it
day would be
tomorrow.
devoted to like the Thanksgiving scene, and not then the kitchen scene. Oh, and by the way, we have to do the basement scene. Like you always look at your schedule
And
and
at
you're like, oh my God, there's
and at the
more.
top of the day, we have to greet everybody at
No, it was a
Thanksgiving and
lot.
do
It was a
that.
lot
I
in
mean,
one
it
day.
was
psychotic. Anyway,
massive, but I think Molly is so good under pressure because of her sketch, experience, and she can do anything, especially under pressure. And I'm a theater actor primarily, so I love working with one take. And that together, I think it created this sort of fast energy that really fed into the hostile mother-daughter, like frenetic nature of that scene, because we had maybe 2 takes to get that
I think,
right.
we had 3.
2 or 3, yeah.
Yeah, 3, but we were in trouble getting the third because we kind of.
I felt it on the
was some
second, though,
bad
so I
editing.
said it was 2 because I thought that was it. And I think it
wonder
was
which
the second take we used.
Yeah.
But it was actually, there was like a flaw.
is the
There
second
was a
take.
flaw in there,
She's
though.
right.
It was like there was a lot, there was like something, and there was like a moment between Molly and I, and it made me like sort of mad at her for like 1 second,
Like a
because
flub.
it was like one of those weird moments where you're sitting there for a second, and neither one of us knew like what the next, like the horse
Beat
was kind of
was.
bucking, and we were like, oh, and I think that led into me being like so angry at her in the next line, and it just fell out beautifully because she knows how to handle that. And then John Carroll Lynch handing over those leftovers may be my favorite comedic moment in the thing, because him passing it through that window is so beautiful, and he's a problem solver on set. He
He's
was
really-
impressive.
He was really great.
Yeah.
He's a director.
Yeah, exactly. So how did you get this movie made? I mean, it's kind of amazing that it's a movie about grown-ups and it's
Yeah.
serious and funny and it's not doesn't have superheroes. And,
Yeah.
I mean, how did
Nothing
you?
blows
She's
up.
a superhero.
Well,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
But how did you go about? I mean, Netflix obviously played a big role.
Well, they saved it because
Yeah.
it was somewhere else. The making of it had, the financing part of it or whatever had these 2 lumps. The first lump was at a company where it was there for like a year. I wanted it to go, it was ready, the script was ready as far as I was concerned, but we brought it into the company and it got put on a development track instead of a straight to production track, which was frustrating. So I did like a rewrite, which was minimal and, like trimming it or something. It just was like protracted and long, and I ended up being there for a year. And then by the time we were really ready to shoot the movie and that they had kind of signed off on our actors, not her, but Paul, Kathryn, another person, when the budget finally reared itself, it didn't match our budget. What they were willing to finance the movie at wasn't enough to shoot it in New York, basically. It was going to have to shoot in Canada, and I was totally depressed about that and not interested in pretending Canada was the East Village. It was Quebec or something. No, Montreal. I was like, that's not going to feel right. So
Not dirty enough.
it's just so depressing. And so anyway, just that even though New York is an important part to who these people are. They're like from the soil of New York. I mean, that they are the kind of people that delay. It's just very specific. So even if I kept saying, like, what are we going to do, like Seinfeld, and we're going to shoot like ba-dum-bum outside of a tenement building or something.
Right.
So, anyway, we ended up leaving that company, and then Netflix really swooped in, and I was surprised.
I also really don't think I would have been in this movie had it not been for Netflix's
Really?
Yeah,
involvement.
there's
no world
way
in
that
which a studio would have allowed
big
me to
part
fill
like
this
that.
role. Like there just isn't, and that's kind of a bummer to me as a person. But Netflix was really, I had done a show called Godless, and they really only had the dailies of that show and the good faith of the director that I had worked with on that show and the people involved who sort of said, like, yeah, she's all right. You can put her in that. But I think that if it had been made anywhere
thought
else,
you were great.
there's no way that it would have made its way to my doorstep. So I'm continually grateful for them because I see them democratizing the process of casting in a way that's very helpful for unknown actors. That we wouldn't get a shot at material this incredible otherwise.
I want to get some questions from the audience, but I wanted to ask you, Kayli, since these are all actors in the audience, how did you get into acting? I mean, you're from Florida. Your parents are not in the business.
They're not.
You went to school in Savannah.
I did. So I did theater in high school, and I was very much a pragmatist. I didn't think that I was going to do this as a profession because it didn't seem like a good way to make money. And this year, I can't say that it's a better way to make money, but I walked on stage to turn off the lights for my theater director in high school, and kind of got grabbed at the chest my senior year and went, oh no, I have to do this.
Literally?
Yeah, no, I
mean, not the chest. Like you, they said go turn off a light. And
yeah,
you walked across the stage for the first time.
I stayed a long time to help my theater director do whatever she needed to do, and one night in junior year of high school, she asked me to go turn off the lights in the auditorium, and I was by myself looking out at chairs like these and thought, oh no, I have to do this. I have to do this, and I have to at least try, because if I don't, I'm going to be really disappointed 20 years down the line that I didn't give it a shot. And so I started applying to schools, did the cattle calls, did the auditions, got called back at some places. And then I walked into Savannah College of Art and Design, and there was a lot of natural light. There were few mirrors on the wall. People didn't seem to be in competition with one another, but were trying to lift each other's work up. And I was blown away. Like, I had not seen that experience of acting. And so I stayed there for 4 years. It kind of treats this as a business school of acting, which I was lucky to have. Immediately did a horror movie, made enough money to move to New York a week after graduating, and tried to make a go of this.
What was the horror movie?
It was the third in the Rings franchise, Rings.
And you played a young Sissy Spacek.
I did
right?
play a young Sissy Spacek, and it was very much a woman at my college showcase coming up to me asking if she could film me on her iPhone, and me going, sure. And a week later, there being a thing saying, like, like production is about to greenlight you. I mean, like, it was literally, I was
Based on that.
based on that, it was a very, very small, like, it had to be in flashback. They just needed someone who looked like Sissy Spacek if you passed quickly. That was all they needed, and that was all I needed to move to New York, so I was happy with it.
Yeah. So a question for Tamara from Tammy.
There's those kind of questions.
Yeah. What do you love most about writing, directing, and producing your own work? And what do you find the most challenging?
Writing is the most challenging.
Really?
Yeah, writing is really. I have to write something now. I'm just paralyzed. I mean, the beginning of writing, before you hook into the thing, when you're like flopping around like a fish. So anyway, writing is, and just stilling yourself and just getting it. Because the problem, at least for me, with writing is that when you if you write and direct and make things, by the time you get back to the writing, you've made the movie, you've got the movie, you're out in the, you forget how to write. You have to go back and like, how do I do this again? I always feel like that. I mean, I feel like sometimes you talk to writers and they say they always feel that way too. They have to do a new book and they're like, I always just feel like I can't believe I ever put all those pages together and it made sense. Like, and that I mean, obviously it's more than that, but I just, so that to me is just, especially right now, feels very intimidating.
And what do you enjoy most?
I mean, it's not that I don't like writing, because when I find the thread, it's thrilling, well, it's also tedious. Everything's tedious and thrilling. There's so much tedium and then like thrill and then tedium and thrill, like all of it. But I think that one of the most, I mean, I had moments on this movie that were truly like I remember being the scene where Kayli, Paul and Kathryn are sitting on the floor eating burritos and they're asking her for her egg, for instance. Like I remember that night. I remember us shooting that. I remember feeling like the scene kind of being like coming alive and feeling, and her, I mean, I really remember that was so beautiful, that performance. You're single. And I just, when, you know, something that you've been like sitting alone in your room and building like a crazy person, you know, and imagining like this could be a thing. And then when you assemble, it's so much to just get to that one little moment where you have these three people in the room that you wrote about a couple of years earlier, and it's clicking. It's like, it's so amazing and beautiful and exciting. So that's thrilling. Editing can be thrilling when you put it together, and it's also terrifying when you crack open the scene of dailies for each thing. You're always like, I don't have it. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, wait, it's in there. And, you know, editing can be really beautiful, but then it's tedious too. Every single thing I just said, like shooting, writing, editing, it's like thrilling and then also sickening and tedious. And like, oh my God, again. So I don't know. I think that all those things kind of go together.
And Kayli, what do you find most enjoyable and most challenging about your work?
This one, there's a very clear roadmap, which I cannot always say for everything. It's very rare to like look at a screenplay and know exactly where that person just came from, where they're gonna go in the next scene, how they're feeling at the top of it. It's rare that somebody lays those things in, and most of the time, I find that I'm going off of physical attributes in a script, which I can't play. If you tell me that a woman is stunning, I don't know how to play that. Like there's no way to play that action. There's no way to play that person. There's nothing there. And so oftentimes I'm trying to like grab things that aren't there from a script that is only describing the physical attributes of a woman. And this was not that experience. And then I looked at Molly and Kathryn's roles, and all of them had like drives of their own. And that's a gift. And it's one I'm not given very often. I would say that's the hardest part of the job, is I got spoiled on this job. I got spoiled doing the theater job I did, because I had people who wanted to know what I had to say about this person. So I think the hardest part of this job is waiting for the next right thing. And sometimes those are very far apart, and they're farther apart than I would like. So I'm trying to figure out how to sit down and write in the way that she is, because if I'm unsatisfied, the only thing that I can do is fix it. So currently I'm trying to do that, because there's a lot of time in between things that people want to ask us to do. And I think sitting on this press tour, for one thing, with Kathryn, and hearing that she didn't feel called to do what she's capable of until after she's had kids, that for the first maybe 15 years of her career, she felt like she wasn't asked to do what she could do, that the things that people needed on screen were not the work that she wanted to do. And to know that, and to think like, okay, how can we impact change so that women are being asked to do what they're capable of instead of just what they've been asked to do before, because that's not enough.
Absolutely. Well, I can't wait to see what both of you do next. Thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Thank you guys
Thanks
for
a lot.
coming.
Being here tonight. Tamara Jenkins and Kayli Carter.